Hey, Lighthouse, good morning. Let's continue our journey through the parables and figure out what it means to be in the kingdom of heaven. When you think of what are Christian traits, I think there's one that gets overlooked a lot that really, in some ways, is the linchpin, is the most basic Christian trait as we think about modeling our lives after Jesus. And so, if you were going to make a list of Christian traits, you might say, well, Christians are forgiving, Christians are loving, Christians are kind. But what about Christians needing to be, or as we follow Christ, we will necessarily be humble? Just not make a big deal about ourselves. Tim Keller says that humility is not thinking less of yourself, rather it's thinking about yourself less. So Jesus knew who he was. Jesus knew he was the Son of God, God himself. He knew he was going to resurrect from the dead. He knows that he's, more far superior to Pilate, far superior to the Pharisees. And yet he lives this life of humility. He knows who he is. He's clear about who he is. And yet, instead of a life of pride and making, much of himself, he lives a life of humility. Even in the act of just, we're told that he considered equality with God not a thing to be grasped. So he has equality with God, but it's not something he would hold on to, but rather he humbled himself to come and be in the form of man. So we need to also not consider all the things that we deserve, rather think about how we might humble ourselves in order to be a blessing, in order to be a witness, in order to show people what Jesus was like. So Jesus was invited to a dinner party in Luke 14. And I want to read a little bit more than this parable. I want to read the intro to it because I want you to notice one of the biggest reasons why Jesus told parables is because when he asked people questions directly, frequently they don't have anything to say. So instead, he's going to communicate with a good story. So verse 1 of chapter 14 says, "One Sabbath, when he went to dine at the house of a ruler of the Pharisees, they were watching him carefully. And behold, there was a man before him who had dropsy." If they've translated this word right and really dropsy's the word, then this is this swelling, this fluid that gets built up in your feet, hands, face, and really is usually a sign of congestive heart failure. So Jesus sees this guy who's really struggling. It's the Sabbath, and Jesus responded to the lawyers and Pharisees saying, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remain silent. They're looking at this guy who's sick, and they go, "Well, I guess it'd be good to heal him. But it is the Sabbath, and that might constitute work." So Jesus puts the question to him before he heals the guy. They don't have anything to say, but they remained silent. And he took him and healed him and sent him away. And he said to them, "Which of you, having a son or an ox that has fallen into a well on the Sabbath day, will not immediately pull him out?" And they could not reply to these things. So again, Jesus is like, look, if you guys have an ox that falls into a ditch on a Saturday, you're going to get him out, right? You're not going to let him lay there and die until the next day. That might have been the situation of this guy. This guy might have not made it another day. And so there's this story about Jesus' focus on his love for this man, and the Pharisees stuck in their religiosity, stuck in their like, yeah, but it has to make sense to us. And there's a tension that just locks them up. They just don't have anything to say. So then Jesus told a parable to those who were invited. So he's at a dinner party telling a story about a dinner party to the people who have been invited to the dinner party. Now he told a parable to those who were invited. When he noticed how they chose the places of honor, saying to them, so he's sitting there, maybe even kind of getting a kick out of it, maybe like rolling his eyes as he watches people angle for the seat closest to the host. And that's not a hard thing to understand, that the most honored guests sat closest to the host, where the least honored guests sat furthest away. And Jesus is watching him angle for sitting in those best seats. And I wonder if he's just even thinking, if these guys knew who I was, if they really understood who I was, man, I'd be sitting in the front seat. but they don't. And so when you are invited by someone to a wedding feast, he says, do not sit down in a place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you be invited by him. And he who invited you both will come and say, give your place to this person. And then you will begin with shame to take the lowest place. But when you're invited, go and sit in the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, friend, move up higher. Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. And let's save verse 11 for a minute from now. So Jesus says, look, there's a practical aspect to humility. It's embarrassing to make a big deal of yourself only to find out that you're not the big deal you thought you were. Anybody who ever showed up, I was a tennis player in high school, and I might show up at a court thinking me and my partner are going to destroy these guys. That's a long fall when you get humiliated, right? When you get beat by just somebody who's better than you. Or, we've all run up against that kind of, oh my gosh, I thought I was a big deal, but I'm finding out that I'm not. And Jesus says there's a practical application to humility where don't make a big deal of yourself. Don't self-promote, and then watch and just let people recognize your good works. Let people recognize the hard work that you've put in. Instead of promoting yourself, there's a good chance that the people around you will recognize you and promote you, where you're probably going to end up sitting in that same seat at the party one way or another. You're going to be in the fifth seat down, but if you go to the first seat and get kicked to the fifth seat, it's going to be a long fall. That is a long walk from that first seat to the fifth seat. Where if you go sit in the 10th seat and get brought up to the fifth seat, well, that's a very wonderful walk up to the fifth seat, right? You're going to end up where you are. So there's a practical application to that. And while that's true, that'll preach not exactly what Jesus is talking about here. He's not just talking about how to have successful dinner parties. Because watch what verse 11 says. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Well, this idea is taken up by Paul. This idea is taken up by Peter, and this idea is taken up by James. All of the biblical writers really focus on our job is to humble ourselves, and God at the proper time will exalt us. Humble yourself before the mighty hand of God, and at the right time, he will exalt you. So while Jesus is talking about a dinner party, really he's talking about the marriage feast of the Lamb. He's talking about our place in the kingdom of God. And you can either walk around proudly declaring how important you are in the kingdom of God, or you can just serve with humility. You can be like Jesus as he takes up the towel at the Last Supper and washes feet. You can listen to Jesus say, the economy is different here. If the first will be last and last shall be first. You can watch Jesus' actions as he serves, as he lives a life that's not only not comfortable, but really a life of poverty. You see how he interacts with people, and you say, Jesus is the ultimate example of lived with humility and was exalted to the highest place. And so you and I, man, we might look at all of life as this dinner party that we've been invited to, especially the kingdom of God. Hey, as we think about our place in God's kingdom, we can either humbly serve and let God exalt us at the proper time in the proper way, so we end up in the proper place. Or we can self-promote, eyes on me, not on Jesus. And we can really, instead of being humble, we can end up humiliated. So today, get over yourself. I'll get over myself. Let's have a good day of just thinking, hey, how can I, with humility, serve and love and forgive and bless? And when it comes to getting what I need, getting what I want, exalting myself, I'll let God worry about that. This is a path to joy, not a path to humiliation. Hey, beloved,